This man owned 10% of Apple. He sold it for $800. Today, that stake would be worth over $100 billion. 1976, a garage in Cupertino. Two broke college dropouts, and the one man who was supposed to keep them from failing. This is the true story of the man who walked away from the most valuable company on earth, CAD, and why his $800 mistake might be the smartest decision you'll ever learn from. Two college dropouts, one overheated garage, a machine nobody believed in. How? Until it built the most valuable company on earth.
Two friends, barely out of their teens, thought that was insane.
Cupertino, California, 1976. No internet, no iPhones. Computers were room-sized machines owned only by governments and universities.
Steve Wozniak was the engineer, a quiet genius who built gadgets purely for fun, never for money.
Steve Jobs was the opposite. Restless, persuasive, obsessed with design, and the idea that machines should feel human. On paper, the two of them made no sense together. In reality, they were about to become the most consequential duo in tech history.
In 1975, one boy started attending the Homebrew Computer Club, hobbyists obsessed with one dream.
Wozniak went home that night and started designing one himself. He wasn't trying to start a company. He just wanted to show his friends. Just raw computing power, stripped down to its bones. He called it the Apple I.
That single decision, sell it, don't give it away, is arguably the moment Apple was actually born.
Jobs convinced Wozniak to sell the boards instead of giving the designs away for free to the hobby club.
On April 1st, 1976, the three of them signed a partnership agreement and called it Apple Computer Company.
Jobs and Wozniak each took 45%. Wayne took...
Nobody signing that paper believed they were creating the most valuable company on the planet. There was one problem. They had almost no money to build anything at all. But they had to find a way. The consequences were dire.
So Jobs sold his Volkswagen van. Wozniak sold his calculator. This was genuinely expensive equipment for an engineer to give up.
Together, it raised them roughly $1,300. Barely enough to buy parts, but enough to open one very important door.
That door belonged to Paul Terrell, owner of one of the country's first computer retail stores, the Byte Shop.
Jobs walked in and asked Terrell to buy his circuit boards. Terrell said no. Bare boards meant customers had to assemble them.
Instead, Terrell made a counteroffer that changed everything. 50 fully assembled computers at $500 each.
That was a real order worth $25,000. An enormous sum for two guys who'd just sold a van and a calculator.
There was just one catch. They had 30 days to deliver something they hadn't even built yet.
To get parts on credit, Jobs negotiated 30-day payment terms, meaning a missed deadline would leave them owing money they didn't have.
Jobs, Wozniak, and a small circle of friends and family worked around the clock. The desperate, unglamorous reality.
And here's where the story turns.
Just 12 days after signing the agreement, before a single Apple I had shipped boy got nervous.
He'd been part of a failed business before, and he was terrified of being personally liable if Apple collapsed.
So he made a decision that would haunt business history forever.
At the time, it felt like a smart, cautious exit from a risky gamble.
Wayne later said he doesn't regret it, that he made the right call with the information he had at the time. Honestly, he's right. Hindsight is easy. Courage in the moment is the hard part. And Apple's story was just getting started.
Against all odds, Jobs and Wozniak delivered 50 Apple I computers to the Byte Shop.
It wasn't pretty. Terrell had to remind them the deal was for assembled units, not bare boards broad. They scrambled to finish in time.
Word started spreading through the small hobbyist community. 2 kids in a garage were building real, working.
One investor was about to make sure the whole world found out.
A retired Intel marketing executive who'd already made his own fortune in his early 30s.
Markula saw the Apple I and, more importantly, the far bigger machine he was already sketching, the Apple II.
Markula didn't just invest money. He personally guaranteed a bank line of credit and wrote Apple.
His investment, $250,000, for roughly a third of the company.
On January 3, 1977, Apple Computer was officially incorporated. A garage.
6 months later, at the West Coast Computer Fair, the Apple II was revealed to the public.
It didn't just impress Pete. It sold in the tens of thousands within its first years. Then, hundreds of thousands.
By 1980, Apple's revenue had grown so fast the company that started with a sold van was ready to go public.
On December 12, 1980, Apple Computer went public. It was the largest IPO since Ford Motor Company decades earlier.
Overnight, it created more new millionaires than almost any stock offering in history.
Steve Wozniak became a multimillionaire too. Early employees who'd worked unpaid overtime in that garage became wealthy beyond anything they'd imagined. And somewhere, watching all of this from the outside, he was that man. From a stake nearly identical in size to the one he'd walked away from less than 5 years earlier. If Wayne had simply held on, hadn't let fear make the decision instead of patience, Bollard, that $800 could have become tens of millions that same week. And over $100 billion decades later. Here's what most people miss about Apple's origin story. It wasn't really about a brilliant invention in a garage. Plenty of brilliant inventions happen in garages and go nowhere. Apple worked because 3 different risk tolerances collided at exactly the right moment. But success didn't mean harmony. The same intensity that built the Apple II would later turn against its creator.
In 1985, Steve Jobs was forced out of his own company after a brutal boardroom power struggle.
Forced out by the very executives Apple had hired to professionalize the business he built from nothing.
It would take 12 years, a near bankruptcy, and one of the most famous comebacks in business history.
Before Jobs walked back through those doors. This time, as the man who'd make Apple the most valuable company on earth.
From a $1,300 garage experiment
to a boardroom betrayal to frail, and a comeback that redefined an entire industry.
Apple's first chapter wasn't a straight line to greatness. It was a chain of small, terrifying decisions, most of which could have gone the other way. So what happened? The man who sold his stake for $800? He never became bitter. He spent decades quietly working as an engineer. In interviews, he's said something that should unsettle every entrepreneur watching this right now. He made the rational decision, with the information available to him at the time, and it still cost him over $100 billion.
Which means the scariest part of this story isn't that he made a mistake. It's that he didn't.
Apple wasn't built by geniuses who knew they'd win.
It was built by 2 broke 20-somethings who sold a van and a calculator and took a 30-day gamble they could have lost, who kept going after their third partner walked away, convinced they were all about to fail. The lesson isn't never play it safe. The lesson is some risks only look reckless in hindsight.
And the only way to know the difference, sometimes, is to bet anyway.
Today, the company that almost didn't survive its first 30 days is worth more than the combined economies of most nations.
Every iPhone in every pocket traces back to a circuit board hand-soldered in a California garage.
And one investor's $800 exit.
The lock screen on that phone in your hand right now exists because two people refused to play it safe.
And one person did this.
If this story actually gripped you, here's a question worth sitting with. What's the $800 decision in your own life right now, the cow? The one that feels safe today, but might be the one you regret in 20 years? Tell me in the comments.
And if you want the next story about the man who sold his steak before it ever went public, subscribe to Verdicts Media. Because that story is even harder to believe.